The room full of silence as music rooms smelled like varnished wood and quiet dreams. Every step Sundar took across the polished floor echoed like a reminder he didn't belong here. Around him were portraits of old composers, all staring down, as if judging him before he even sat at the piano. Sunlight spilled through the tall glass windows, casting long shadows that reached toward him like whispers of doubt. The audience wasn't here yet, but the room was already full of expectations, full of nerves, full of that strange feeling you get when you're about to do something you aren't sure you're good at. Sundar stood frozen near the side of the stage, his fingers twitching with invisible energy.
Ow.
He wasn't dressed like the others. No tuxedo, no slicked back hair, no polished shoes, just a simple white shirt, slightly wrinkled, and black jeans that had seen too many walks through the streets of Chennai and too few ironing boards. He had no formal training. He had no fancy background. He had no wealthy patron or genius mentor. What he had was a borrowed piano in his tiny rented apartment, a pair of old headphones that only worked on one side, and a hunger to play. Not just notes, but feelings, real ones. And that's exactly what had gotten him invited to this prestigious international piano showcase in Vienna. A short video, shaky, poorly lit, with him playing on a wobbly stool in a half-lit room. At the emotion in his playing had stirred something in the judge who found it. And now, here he was, far from home, surrounded by people who had spent their whole lives preparing for this. Then came the pianist. Not just any pianist. Adrien Leclerc, the French prodigy who'd been called a once-in-a-century talent. He had sold out arenas, played for presidents, and once made a grown critic cry during a live concert in Berlin. He walked into the room like he owned it, tall, with a long black coat, and an expression that said, "You are lucky just to breathe the same air as me." When he saw Sundar sitting quietly, studying the old upright piano near the corner, Adrian smirked. A short, amused sound escaped his throat. Not a laugh, not a word. Just a sound that made everyone else in the room look. "You are... the technician?" Adrian asked, loud enough for the others to hear. Sundar looked up confused. "The piano tuner?" Adrian continued, gesturing to Sundar's. "Clothes? Or maybe you are here to clean the keys." There was a chuckle from someone behind Adrian, another pianist probably. Someone with perfect posture and a $12,000 jacket. Sundar said nothing, not because he didn't want to defend himself, but because he had learned that silence sometimes says more than shouting. Gave a small nod, looked back at the piano, and let the moment pass. Adrien, not satisfied, walked over and leaned on the piano beside him. "Do you even know what a Schubert inversion is?" he asked, his voice light, playful, but with knives hidden in the words. "No," Sundar said quietly. "But I know what it feels like when your father walks into your room and doesn't say a word, 'cause he's too tired from working all day. But you can hear everything he's feeling just by the way he sits down." Adrien blinked, confused. Sundar didn't look at him. He just pressed a single key on the piano. Soft, low, a note that hung in the air like an unfinished sentence. "That's what I know," Sundar whispered. The room went still. Adrie turned, rolled his eyes, and walked away, but not before muttering something in French that sounded suspiciously like crazy village boy. Later, as the hall filled with a quiet crowd and the showcase began, Sundar waited backstage. One by one, the other pianists played. Their fingers were fast, precise, powerful. Each performance was met with applause, some with standing ovations. Adrian played third, delivering a flawless interpretation of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The audience was breathless. Its hands danced like they had their own minds. People whispered words like genius and transcendent. When he finished, he didn't bow. He just turned, winked at a woman in the front row, and walked off stage, like a man who had already won. Then finally, it was Sundar's turn. His name was called not with excitement, just curiosity. A few raised eyebrows, a few murmurs of, "Is this the guy from the video?" Someone even said, "Oh, this'll be short." Sundar walked out with no grace. His shoes squeaked slightly. He smiled awkwardly. No one smiled back. He sat at the grand piano. He placed his hands gently on the keys. For a moment, he just sat there doing nothing. The silence stretched. People began shifting in their seats. A cough echoed in the back row. Udrine leaned forward in the audience, amused. Then Sundar began to play. Not like the others. Not fast, not flashy, deliberate, like he was telling a secret to each person in the room. His fingers moved like they were remembering something painful, something beautiful, something true. The notes weren't always perfect, but the emotion was. And then something happened. A woman in the fourth row began to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just tears, soft and honest. Then another. People stopped breathing for a moment. Even Adrian, arms crossed, slowly uncrossed them. Sundar didn't notice. Or maybe he did, but he didn't change anything. He kept playing. Played like a man who had nothing to prove, but everything to share. He played memories of his mother. Humming lullabies in the kitchen, he played the silence of long nights spent studying by candlelight. He played the ache of missing home, the fear of failure, the courage it takes to try anyway. He played until the room forgot who he was, forgot how he dressed, forgot how they judged him. He played until even the portraits on the wall seemed to lean closer, listening, and when he hit the final note, just a single, trembling key. The room didn't applaud. Not right away. They just sat in silence. Full, heavy, electric silence, like the kind that only comes after truth. But before Sundar could stand up, Adrian rose from his seat in the front row. He walked toward the stage, slow, measured. People turned. Unsure what he would do then, Adrian climbed the steps, stood beside Sundar, and looked at the piano. "Play it again," he said softly. "But this time, let me play with you." Sundar looked at him, unsure if he was serious. A dear in single quotes as unreadable, but his voice had changed. No mockery, just something close to respect. Or maybe regret, and then the lights in the hall flickered. A loud crash echoed backstage. A sharp metallic sound, like something falling. Then a man rushed in, whispering urgently to one of the organizers. Gasps followed. Something had happened. Something bad. And just like that, the music was gone. The stage was no longer a stage. The showcase had become something else entirely. And soon, Sundar was about to learn that his story, the real story, was only just beginning. The key that wasn't supposed to exist. Sound of the crash lingered in the air, sharp like a wrong note in a perfect symphony. For a few seconds, no one moved. It was like time froze, like the music had pressed pause on the entire world. Sundar was still seated, his hands hovering just above the keys. Adrian, standing beside him with one foot slightly forward, caught mid-step. Then the murmurs began. Quiet at first. Ripples of unease spreading across the room. A man in a dark suit rushed across the edge of the stage, whispering urgently into the ear of the event coordinator, who instantly turned pale. She nodded, then walked quickly to the mic, tapping it twice. The soft crackle echoed. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice tight but trying to stay calm. "Please remain seated. There has been an unexpected situation backstage. We ask for your patience as we assess things." The audience stiffened. Someone coughed nervously. A young boy clutched his mother's hand a little tighter. Sundar glanced sideways at Adrian, who was still looking toward the wings of the stage, not smug now, not amused, but focused, like he knew something the others didn't. Then Adrian leaned in close and whispered, "Don't leave the piano." Sundar blinked. "Why?" Adrian didn't answer. Instead, he stepped off the stage. But instead of returning to his seat, he moved toward the back, toward the source of the commotion. The moment he disappeared behind the curtain, 2 security guards hurried in from the far side of the hall, exchanging words on radios. People were standing now, whispering questions no one could answer. Sundar sat alone at the grand piano. He felt like an actor left on stage after the play had ended, unsure if he was supposed to keep going or just disappear. He looked down at the keys, so quiet now, moments ago. They had sung memories into the air. Now they stared back at him like closed eyes. And then he saw something strange. A small sliver of metal, barely visible, sticking out from under the piano's frame. Like a piece of something hidden, something not meant to be found. Instinctively, he leaned closer, reaching down. It wasn't part of the piano, it was wedged in, thin, cold. Almost like ... a key. But not for music. He gently tugged it free. It was old, with a strange engraving on one side, a swirl, almost like a signature, but not in any language he recognized. He turned it over in his palm. It hummed faintly. Or maybe that was his heartbeat. Either way, something about it felt off, but not dangerous. Familiar, even. Like the way certain dreams feel like memories. Before he could examine it further, a voice called his name from offstage. Not a shout, just his name. Soft, but urgent. He stood slowly, slipped the key into his pocket, and walked into the backstage shadows. The hallway behind the stage was dim, lit only by overhead bulbs that flickered uncertainly. Sundar's footsteps echoed too loudly against the concrete floor. Round a corner, he found Adrian standing near a broken utility box, its door hanging open, wires exposed like veins. Next to it, a technician sat on the floor holding his arm, blood seeping through a torn sleeve. Adrian was crouched beside him, pressing a cloth to the wound. Someone tampered with the system, Adrian said without looking up. It wasn't an accident. Sundar's brows knit together. Why? Adrian finally met his eyes. Maybe the same reason you were invited here. That stopped him. What do you mean? Adrian stood, wiping his hands on a cloth. I watched your video. I didn't want to like it, but I did. Not because of your technique. It's raw, but because your playing opened something. He paused, looked down the hall. The kind of thing some people don't want opened? You're not making sense, Sundar said quietly. Adrian stepped closer. This showcase isn't just a concert, Sundar. It's a test. A door. Not everyone wants it opened. A long silence passed. Then Adrian reached into his own coat pocket and pulled out something small, a folded piece of parchment. He handed it to Sundar. On it was a map. A floor plan, but not of the concert hall. It showed hidden passages beneath. Tunnels, chambers, strange symbols. In the center, marked in red ink, was a small circle. What is this? The room where the music was born, Adrian said. Before it became performance. Before it was tamed. Sundar looked down again at the paper. Then, almost without thinking, his fingers touched the key in his pocket. You found it, didn't you? Adrian asked. Sundar hesitated, then nodded. Adrian gave a small smile, not mocking. Real. Then you've already begun. A door creaked. Nearby, voices shouted. More guards. Adrie leaned in once more. They'll try to stop you. But don't let them. Not now. Why me? Sundar whispered. Adrie looked toward the stage. Because you don't just play music. You feel it. Maybe that's the only way to unlock the real sound. Suddenly, a man in a black blazer appeared from around the corner, pointing at both of them. You too. Stay where you are. Adrian turned to run. Sundar hesitated for a moment too long. A heavy hand landed on his shoulder. We need to speak with you, the man said. What about the key? Sundar's heart stopped. He hadn't shown it to anyone. He hadn't spoken of it aloud. And yet, they knew. The room with no echo man in the black blazer didn't speak like a security guard. He spoke like a librarian protecting a secret shelf. His grip on Sundar's shoulder was firm but not violent. Like he wasn't trying to stop Sundar, just delay him long enough for something else to arrive. Or awaken. Come with me, the man said. Eyes steady. Sundar's brain screamed at him to run, to find Adrian, to hide the key, to do something. But his body moved anyway, pulled forward by fear, dressed as curiosity. The hallway seemed narrower. Now, the walls closer. As if the building itself wanted to listen in, they passed through a door marked staff only, then down a stairwell that creaked like it hadn't seen light in years. It wasn't built for elegance. This was the kind of place where wires hung from the ceiling and dust told stories no one had asked for. At the bottom, there was a steel door with no handle, just a black slot in the middle. The shape of a key, not just any key, his key. The man turned. "You have it, don't you?" Sundar swallowed hard. "What is this place?" Instead of answering, the man stepped aside, gesturing toward the door like a magician inviting a volunteer. Sundar hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out the strange, swirling key. The metal was cold but alive, like it had been waiting. He slid it in. There was a click, not mechanical. Something older. Like bones remembering how to move, the door creaked open. Beyond it, a room, round, dim, walls covered in carvings that pulsed faintly, as though remembering a song long forgotten. In the center, a piano, ancient, carved from dark wood, that shimmered with symbols. It didn't shine. It breathed. But there was no echo. Not even from their footsteps. Sundar stepped in slowly. The air was thick, not with dust, but with silence. The kind that presses into your chest and doesn't let go. "What is this?" he asked again, quieter now. The man didn't follow. He stood in the doorway, arms folded. "This room listens, but it only echoes truth." Sundar turned, frowning. "Most instruments reflect sound," the man continued. "This one absorbs it. If you play lies, it swallows them. If you play truth, it responds." Sundar blinked. "Responds how?" But the man only nodded once, then stepped back. "Play." The door began to close. "Wait," Sundar started, but it was too late. The door clicked shut behind him. He was alone with the piano. He looked around the walls, strange shapes. It's not just symbols, musical notations. Twisted into spirals, dots that felt like eyes. He stepped to the piano and laid his fingers gently on the keys. They felt soft, worn, like skin. He pressed one, no sound. Then another, still nothing. But then a whisper. Not a note, but a memory. His mother's voice, calling his name in the kitchen. When he was 10, her laugh. The clink of metal cups. He pulled his hand back. The sound vanished. He touched the key again. The memory returned. Each key held something, not notes. His life, he began to play, slowly at first, cautious, like walking. Barefoot through old dreams. And the room filled not with music, but with moments. His first bike. The look in his father's eyes when Sundar showed him his college acceptance letter. The silence when his father said, "We can't afford the ticket, son." The room didn't. Echo. It remembered. And then, a new sound. From behind him, a soft breath. Someone else was in the room. He turned quickly. A girl stood near the wall, barefoot, in a pale yellow dress that shimmered like old pages. Her hair was tied in a messy braid. Her eyes were wide, not frightened, but searching. "You found it," she said, like she'd been waiting years just to say those 3 words. "Who are you?" Sundar asked. "A note that never got played," she replied. He blinked. "What does that even mean?" She walked closer. "Every person has a song. Some people play theirs loudly. Others never find it. Yours is unfinished." Sundar took a step back. "Am I dreaming?" She shook her head. "You're remembering." The air shifted. The room darkened around the edges, like the light had decided to listen instead of shine. She pointed to the piano. "That instrument doesn't just play music. It plays truth, and truth is dangerous." Sundar looked down at the keys. "It happens if I finish the song?" Her eyes flickered, like candlelight before a storm. "You open the gate?" Before he could ask what gate, the wall behind her began to change. The carvings twisted like vines growing in reverse, revealing a passage narrow and pulsing with a low hum. The girl nodded toward it. "Your next note is in there." Sundar hesitated. "Why me? Why not Adrian?" She looked down. He tried once, but he lied when he played. The piano swallowed his truth. Sundar shivered. What happens if it swallows mine? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked toward the hidden passage, and with no other choice, Sundar followed. The walls closed behind them, and somewhere, far above, in the hall where people still waited, the showcase was being quietly canceled, but no one could explain why all the microphones had started playing a song no one had heard before. Asterisk the passage that listened at the tunnel did not feel like a place. It felt like a decision. The air didn't move. Not forward, not backward. It hung thick, like fog made of memory. Sundar walked carefully, the girl just ahead of him, her pale yellow dress glowing faintly in the dark. He tried to count his steps, but after 23 numbers stopped making sense. Every few feet the walls shimmered, shifting like old watercolors. Sometimes they showed faces, sometimes hands. Sometimes nothing at all. He reached out once to touch the wall, pulsed under his fingers. Soft, warm, like skin stretched too thin over bone. Don't touch them, the girl said without turning around. They remember more than you do. He jerked, his hand back, heart thudding. What is this place? He whispered. A score with no end, she said. And every note takes something. His footsteps grew heavier, like the ground was pulling at his shoes, trying to keep him. The key in his pocket buzzed faintly, like it wanted to be used again. But there was no door here. Only a hallway that curved deeper and deeper, coiling like a question no one had dared ask aloud. They reached a small chamber, round, stone. Silent in the middle sat a wooden bench, and on it a violin, broken in half. The strings were snapped. The bow lay beside it, untouched, but stained red at the tip. This is where he stopped, the girl whispered. Who? Adrian. Sundar stared at the violin. Something about it made his teeth hurt. He got this far? She nodded. He tried to finish his song, but he only played the part he wanted others to hear. What does that mean? She looked at him. Her eyes were wide and sad. He skipped the shame. The walls darkened suddenly. Images flickered across the stone. Adrian, younger, standing on a stage with bruises on his fingers, crying while an older man yelled behind a curtain. Adrian burning sheet music in a trash can. Adrian looking into a mirror, whispering something over and over that sounded like I'm not enough. The vision vanished. He played beauty, the girl said, but not honesty. In this place, it needs all of you, not just the part that sparkles. Sundar swallowed hard. He looked down at his hands. They trembled now. I don't want to remember everything. No one does, she replied. He turned away from the violin, but the strings echoed anyway, not as notes, but as words. Whispers from every choice he'd buried under ambition. Moments he'd rewritten in his mind to feel cleaner, safer. His mother offering her gold earrings to help pay for his plane ticket. The way he let her smile and pretend she was proud when he knew she was scared. The letter he never answered. From his old friend in Chennai, who asked him not to forget home. The one he did forget. He closed his eyes, but the memories kept playing. The girl stepped closer. Her voice was soft, almost invisible. You still think this is about music? He opened his eyes slowly. It's not. She shook her head. It's about sound, and sound is truth. Every time you lie, even to yourself, the world hears it. It just doesn't always speak back. He looked down at the floor, and now it is. She nodded. From somewhere deeper in the tunnel, a new sound echoed. Not music, not footsteps, something more mechanical. Deliberate. A click, followed by silence. Then another. They're coming, she whispered. Who? Those who listen. Without ears. He turned to ask more, but she was already walking again, faster now. The tunnel twisted ahead like a serpent made of old regrets. Sundar followed. Not because he trusted her, but because the alternative was standing still. The passage was not a place for stillness. They came to another door. No handle, no lock. Only a blank slab of stone. And a question carved across it. What is the sound? Of your silence? Sundar stared at the words. The girl stepped back. "This part's yours alone." He touched the door. It was warm. It was alive. Then he heard it not outside. Inside, his own silence. The moments he could never explain to anyone. The times. He didn't speak up. The time his cousin had cried on the train ride to the city, and Sundar had pretended to sleep instead of asking why. The job he wanted but didn't apply for, because he thought he wasn't enough. The email he wrote to his father before his passing and never sent. His silence had shaped, and now it had sound. He closed his eyes, placed his hand flat against the stone, and whispered, "I'm sorry." The door cracked, slowly, silently. It slid open inside. There was nothing but darkness. He stepped in, and the door closed behind him. Total. Black. Total quiet. Until a single piano note played, not from a piano, but from inside him. His chest vibrated. Then, voice, deep, ancient. Not male, not female. Just, "There, why do you play?" Sundar opened his mouth, but no sound came out, and he realized finally terribly he didn't know. The silence he left behind the question did not wait for an answer. It watched for one. Sundar stood in the dark. No floor beneath his feet that he could feel, no ceiling above to end the void. The piano note still echoed inside his chest, not in sound but in sensation, like a distant thunder he couldn't outrun. And again, the voice asked, "Why do you play?" He opened his mouth, but still nothing. His throat clenched around emptiness. Words melted before they formed. Like the silence inside him had teeth now. He tried to remember the first time he ever touched a piano. Cracked wooden keys in a neighbor's house. The broken bench. A radio playing through a wall. It played not because it was beautiful, but because it gave shape to something inside him. It had no name. But that wasn't the truth the room wanted. The silence wasn't passive anymore. It leaned in. He could feel it breathing. He whispered, "I play because I'm afraid not." 2. And the silence paused, then cracked. A faint light opened in the far corner of the room, not like sunlight, but like memory trying to remember itself. He turned toward it, and suddenly the space had walls. Rough stone, curved, like the inside of a bell that had never been rung. He walked slowly. The light led him to a mirror, or what might have once been a mirror. Its surface was warped, not reflecting his face, but scenes. Flickering like film, there was his mother. Not young, not old, just tired. Sitting at the kitchen table, holding her hands together, whispering prayers between breaths. There was his friend, Rahul, the one who used to sneak into abandoned classrooms with Sundar just to touch the school piano. He looked older now, heavier, alone. Reading an article online about Sundar's rise. Expression caught between pride and something more hollow, scene after scene, moment after moment. He had pushed away to make room for success, and the voice, not in the air but in his ribs, spoke again. "You buried your song beneath your story. Now which one will you choose?" The mirror shimmered, and this time it showed Sundar himself, not as he was, but as he could have been. Still in Chennai. Still anonymous, playing piano in a small cafe, surrounded by laughter, no cameras, no news articles, no interviews. Quiet life. A real one. Then the image changed. His current self backstage at the Vienna showcase, moments before stepping out. Adrena walking past, the stage lights blinding. The quiet ache in his chest as he wondered, will they see me or just hear me? I don't know which version is real, he said aloud. And finally the voice gave no riddle. It's no echo, only this. Then play the difference. A door appeared beside the mirror. Small, barely wide enough to fit a person on it. A single symbol, a swirl. The same as the engraving on the key, his key. He stepped through and found himself back in the chamber. The girl was there waiting, but now she held something in her hands. Not a violin, not a key, a page. Wrinkled, wet at the edges with musical notes written in charcoal strokes. What is that? Sundar asked, his voice barely his own. "The unfinished song," she said. "Yours." He stepped closer, reading the page. The notes were familiar but not exact. It was as if someone had followed the melody of his life, then paused, waiting for him to catch up. She handed it to him, and behind her, the old piano, the one from before, returned. This time the lid was open. The bench was warm. He sat, placed. The sheet music in front of him, looked at the girl. She smiled faintly. But her eyes were different now. Not young, not sad. Older than time. "This is the part," she said, "where the world stops listening and you begin." Down at the keys, breathed, and began to play. No audience, no applause. Just notes that crawled from his ribs and found their way home. Not clean notes, not proud ones. Some trembled. Some cracked halfway through. Some were so soft, they barely existed. But every one of them was real. As the last note faded, the stone chamber didn't echo. It exhaled. A sound, like wind through old pages. And somewhere above, in the hall long emptied, the lights flickered once. A single speaker crackled back to life and played Sundar's song, unfiltered, unfinished, unforgettable. But just as the room seemed to exhale relief, something new emerged from the far end of the chamber. Not light, it's not shadow, Adrian, his hands shaking, his face pale. But alive. "You found it," he whispered. Sundar stood. "Why did you come back?" Adrian didn't speak. He stepped toward the piano, looked down at the keys, then looked up. With eyes full of fear, "Because we were wrong," he said. "This place. It doesn't end when you play the truth." He looked back toward the tunnel. Behind him, voice trembling, it opened something. And behind him, a second door began to breathe. Not open, breathe. Asterisk the door that hears everything. The second door did not swing open. It breathed inward, outward, slow, like something sleeping. Behind it had finally stirred. Not with hunger, not with anger. With awareness, Sundar stepped back from the piano. Adrian stood frozen, eyes fixed on the strange door, like it had whispered his name in a language only fear could understand. The girl didn't speak. She didn't move. She only looked at Sundar as if she'd known this was coming. Not today, not this way, but always. "What's behind it?" Sundar asked, voice breaking like a leaf underfoot. Adrian swallowed. "It's not a room. Not like before." The door pulsed. Not with light, but with sound. Low, pulsing, not quite a heartbeat, not quite a drum. Right. Like the echo of something that had existed before music had shape. Sundar felt it press against his ribs, against his thoughts. "It's memory," Adrian whispered. "Whose?" Adrian looked at him, hollow. "Everyone's." The girl finally stepped forward. Her voice was different now. No longer soft. No longer a guide. More like a key clicking into a lock from the inside. "Music was never made to entertain," she said. "It was made to hold things we couldn't say. Grief, wonder, shame, hope. Every note you've ever heard was someone trying not to break." The door exhaled again, and this time it opened. But what poured out was not air or light or heat. It was sound, not loud, limitless. A wave of voices, notes, laughter, screams, prayers, lullabies, footsteps, breath, apologies, dreams never spoken aloud, tears no one had seen. They flooded the chamber like water that had waited too long behind a dam made of denial. The sound was not noise, was the unfinished song of the world. Sundar fell to his knees, his chest hurt, but not with pain, with remembering every lie he'd told to be liked, every silence he'd used instead of love, every moment he could have chosen kindness, but instead chose ambition. Adrian was crying now, not softly, fully. The way a child cries when they realize the world is not as big as they hoped, but far more fragile. The sound surged, then steadied, not with force but direction. It knew soon. Aaron had asked, not with words but tone. "What now?" He stood slowly. The piano behind him, aimed at the broken violin on the wall, began to vibrate. Strings rebinding, bow lifting without touch. Sundar stepped into the light of the open door, and for the first time, he did not feel small. Inside was no chamber, no hallway, no stone, just people. Hundreds, thousands, some familiar, most not, but each playing instruments, made of memory and breath and regret, and all of them stopped when he entered. They looked at him not with worship, not with suspicion, with relief, as if they'd been waiting for one more part of the song to arrive. He took a step forward. One of them handed him a second sheet of music, unfinished, again, just like the first. And in that moment, he understood you never finish the song. You only choose to keep playing it, to play with honesty, to play with care, to play with care. 2. Play like sound itself can stitch people back together. He sat at a piano unlike any he'd seen. No, keys just touch. He placed his hands upon it, closed his eyes, and began again. This time, the sound didn't stay in the room. It rose through the floor of the concert, hauled through the streets of Vienna, through radios and wires and unplayed recordings. People paused, looked up, wept without knowing why, because the song had no words. It said everything. And somewhere in a small home in Chennai, an old woman felt her heart slow, not from pain, but from peace. She whispered her son's name, and the walls around her shimmered. With music, the story didn't end, because stories that tell the truth never do they echo, final line. And long after the world forgot his name, it remembered his sound.